appreciate you all coming out this afternoon. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Professor Peter Calcano. I'm the Director of the Initiative for Public Choice Market Process, and I want to welcome everybody to our second BB&T Free Market Process Speaker Series this semester, and which is part of our 5th annual Adam Smith Week. As you came in, you should have seen that there were sign-in cards and questionnaires, so I would encourage you, please fill those out. The attendance cards will be returned to your professors if need be, if you needed any added incentive to attend. In addition, please fill them out for us because they help us get a head count. Although at this point I think I might have an estimate of how many of you all. The questionnaires, though, please fill those out. That also gives us some feedback. Helps us to find out what speakers you like, whether or not they were interested, and so forth. So yes, Tom, we will be ready. The schedule for Adam Smith Week, the rest of the events that are going on, we've got a fantastic schedule for this week, are out on the table, so please grab them on your way out. Look at the other events. We've got some really great events tomorrow. Like David Schmitz, who is a phenomenal professor of economics and philosophy, is going to be talking on Adam Smith at 3 o'clock tomorrow, so I encourage you all to attend that as well. The mission of the Initiative for Public Choice and Market Process is to advance the understanding of the economic, political, and moral foundations of a free society. I encourage you to try to find us on our web, on Facebook, on Twitter. Today, I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. Boudreaux. Dr. Boudreaux received his PhD in economics from Auburn University and his law degree from the University of Virginia. He is currently a professor of economics at George Mason University, where he served as the chairman of the department from 2001 to 2009. Previously, he was president of the Foundation for Economic Education, associate professor of legal studies and economics at Clemson University, and was the Olin visiting fellow in law and economics at Cornell Law School. He has lectured in the U.S., Canada, Latin America, and Europe on a wide variety of topics, including antitrust and economics and international trade. He is published in the Wall Street Journal, the Investor's Business Daily, Reason, and the Washington Times. His research has appeared in such scholarly journals as Southern Economic Journal and Journal of Money, Credit, and Banking. He is the author of a book entitled Globalization, A Guide to Business and Economics. And he writes a popular blog called Cafe Hayek with Russ Roberts, who was a speaker a couple of years ago, for those of you who may remember that. Excellent blog, very entertaining, very informative. I encourage you to check that out. His recent book, Hypocrites and Half-Wits, a witty, entertaining collection of the best letters and that address the shaky facts, faulty reasoning, and intellectual dishonesty that threaten the free society. How do you say that? All right. With that, I give you Professor Don Boudreaux, who's going to talk to us about the economic fate of American middle class.
Thank you. Am I mic? Talk. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure. I've said for a long time that Charleston is one of my 3 favorite places in the world, and it's true. It's one of the few places that if someone talked me down and said you could never leave, I would not be that upset. I love Charleston. I came here a lot when I taught at Clemson. Clemson's a long drive away. Charleston was so interesting. Clemson's not so interesting. That I spent a lot of time here. And I'm delighted also that I'm speaking at an event that Adam Smith Week themed to it. You should be delighted I'm the first speaker because the speakers after me are really good. And so I'll make them look even better as they go along. I have some creds to justify my addressing you at Adam Smith Week. For example, I used to have a Scottish Terrier dog, and I was a Scottish philosopher, and I named my Scottish Terrier dog Adam Smith. And I have a son who's almost 16 years old, the dog was still alive then, and I would have named my son Adam Smith, that's true, except his mother objected, couldn't have a child and a dog, both named Adam Smith. So my son's named Thomas. I wish the dog would have died earlier. No. I teach a course on the wealth of nations at George Mason. But my lecture today is not so much on Adam Smith, but it's on a broadly Smithian theme, as I hope you'll see. And before I get to my own PowerPoint presentation, there is a narrative that has been going on now for quite some time in the United States. And in summary form, that narrative is this. America's middle classes prospered, basically from the beginning of the Republic, a few years in which that wasn't true, until the mid-1970s. And come the mid-1970s, America's middle class has stagnated economically. America's middle classes today live no better than they lived in 1973 or 1975 or 1980, depending upon the particular pundit that you listen to. This narrative is issued mostly by people on the political left for reasons that, if I have time at the end of the talk, I may get into. That couldn't be why they're interested in this political narrative. But it is a political narrative. I think this narrative is fundamentally mistaken, and that's the general goal of my talk today, to explain that this narrative, which if you read the New York Times, the New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, the Washington Post, read any number of blog posts, Huffington Post, Ezra Klein, you will find this claim repeated over and over and over again that America's middle class is stagnating economically, has been stagnating economically now for 2 generations. One should be careful about making scientific inferences or claims based upon one's personal experience. I don't intend to do that, although I do not think that personal experience is irrelevant. Unfortunately, my personal experience includes the 1970s. I was born in 1958, and so I was a senior in high school in 1975. So I remember very clearly the exact time when, according to this narrative, America's middle class hit its economic pinnacle and has supposedly not changed ever since. This narrative has never made sense to me. I look around the world and I don't see the narrative as being correct. And as you'll see, I'm going to show you some I think interesting pictures, little pictures that challenge this narrative. But let's explore the narrative first in some detail. So one way we might pose the question is, has more economic freedom helped or hurt Americans since the middle of the 1970s? Or, put the question this way, was this man a menace to the middle class? Though he's wearing an Adam Smith tie, by the way. It's another Adam Smith book for the lecture. This is the late Milton Friedman, who died in 2006. Milton Friedman, unquestionably one of the greatest economists of the past 100 years, worked strongly in the Smithian tradition. And the reason I put it this way is, I heard on one of the Sunday morning news programs during the during the 2008 election campaign, presidential election campaign. And I forget now which talking head on Sunday morning said this, but that person said Milton Friedman was a menace to America's middle class. And the reason this is related is because it is true that starting in the late 1970s, there was the rate of government intrusion into the economy slowed. We actually had some genuine deregulation. Some deregulation of banking, some deregulation of surface transportation, some deregulation of telecommunications, some deregulation of airlines. Ronald Reagan, of course, was elected to the presidency in 1980. Marginal tax rates on both corporate and personal incomes fell. To listen to the political left tell the story, starting in about 1980, America entered into a completely laissez-faire economy. The federal government just disappeared. Washington went away. Of course, that's not true at all, but there was some deregulation. There was some additional regulation that we can talk about that. But I do not doubt that starting in the late 1970s, by the way, under Carter, before even Reagan got into office, there was some deregulation. And it's that deregulation and the cut in marginal tax rates that came soon afterward that I believe prompt the proponents of this narrative of middle-class stagnation to claim that the stagnation thesis is true. if regulation is good for ordinary Americans and high taxes are good for ordinary Americans, then deregulation and lower tax rates must be bad for ordinary Americans. And so they try to find evidence that supports that narrative. We can find some evidence that supports it, like all popular stories. This one has a kernel of truth. That if you focus only on that kernel of truth, the narrative seems to be accurate. For example, inflation adjusted before tax, money income for the median American household has stagnated. I'll show you a picture of this later. Since the mid-1970s. Today it's only about 18% higher than it was in 1976. By the way, as a footnote, most of the data that I'll use, not all, most of the data that I'll use will be up to just before the current recession. The current recession has, of course, caused a deeper stagnation in living standards than otherwise. I think this current recession is temporary, and I don't want to judge long-term trends based upon the current recession. So I'll look at data largely from the mid-1970s or 1980 up to just before the current recession, so 2008, 2009. Okay. Inflation-adjusted hourly money wages for the median non-supervisory production line worker has hardly budged. By some measures, today it's actually 4% lower than it was in 1975. And if you take those statistics of only an 18% higher household income, that's not much growth over the course of 30 years. Stagnant money wages, that's no growth. It looks like American middle class has stagnated. This is a picture of that household growth. That red line shows the median household income in 2006 dollars, so constant inflation-adjusted dollars. It's flat, virtually horizontal. It's going up by only 18% when adjusted for inflation between 1976 and 2006. In terms of the wage, put in today's dollar, 1912 dollars, average hourly earnings for non-supervisory worker in America. You get these data off of the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. In 1975, the typical worker in America earned about $4.73. You translate those to 2012 dollars, that's $19.70. Today, that worker earns $20.42. There's not a whole lot of difference between 1970 and $20.42. That looks like stagnation. And to me, it looks like stagnation, certainly to a lot of people who tell the narrative. Here's some quotations. This is from my colleague, Tyler Cowen. Certainly no man of the political left, and even he now accepts the stagnation thesis. This is quoting from his 2011 book entitled The Great Stagnation. Quoting, median family income is the single best measure of how much we're producing new ideas that benefit most American population, yet the picture is depressing. I'll say as a footnote, Tyler is one of the most creative and ingenious scholars that I know. This book came out in 2011 and was published as an e-book. I find it ironic that a book on the Great Stagnation was published as an e-book, but so it was. This is from a man on the other side of the political spectrum. This is Robert Reich, who was Secretary of Labor under President Clinton, writing in the Financial Times a few years ago, quoting him, almost all of the benefits of economic growth since the 1970s have gone to a small number of people at the very top. So this is a somewhat more precise version of the stagnation thesis. Yes, there's been economic growth in America, but only the top 1% got it. The rest of us, nothing. We're still living as our parents lived, well, as I lived as a high school student, as your parents or grandparents lived back when Gerald Ford was stumbling through the White House. And I assure you, these quotations are almost chosen at random. You can look in the mid-1990s, early 2000s, today, and find very similar quotations that say almost the same thing. This is quite a common, widely accepted view. So is it correct? Are the policies advocated by Milton Friedman or Adam Smith, who are still alive? Were the policies that would have been advocated by Adam Smith, are they responsible for a stagnant middle class? As I mentioned before, not all of Friedman's ideas were put into effect. We could challenge, as Al mentioned briefly, challenge the accuracy of adjusting for inflation. Obviously, dollars in 1975, mid-1970s, were different than dollars are today. Dollars went a lot further back then. They bought a lot of inflation over the course of the past nearly 40 years. So in order to compare prices today and wages today to prices in the past, we have to adjust those prices and wages for inflation. There are lots of different ways to adjust for inflation. One of the most common is to use the Consumer Price Index. It's a perfectly legitimate way to adjust for inflation, but there are other ways to adjust for inflation. Every serious scholar and economist who works with these figures understands that different methods of adjusting for inflation have different strengths and weaknesses. There is no one right method to use to adjust for inflation. And everybody also understands that adjusting for inflation is at least as much an art as it is a science. A lot of human judgment and judgment calls enter into the process of adjusting for inflation. Let me give you an example of what I mean. This is a picture of a bag of celery that I bought this past summer. I took this picture last summer. By the way, I took this picture using my cell phone. We all have these little slabs that we carry around with us. I took this picture using my cell phone. I go into the local supermarket in Northern Virginia where I live, Safeway, and I bought the celery, and I took it and I realized I was holding before me something pretty remarkable. It's celery, you know what celery is. But I don't think how well you can see it. It's got a resealable top. You know, so you brought the celery in this bag and you pressed your finger along the top after you took out the celery, and it would reseal, it would keep the celery fresher. That's a really small thing. You don't think about it. You don't go to the supermarket and find that celery bag and write home to mom and dad about it. You don't have the sense that your world has been rocked. And it has. It's a tiny thing. But it is an improvement in the quality of food delivery. In the mid-1970s, heck, in the mid-1980s, I'm not sure when this came up, but certainly in the you didn't buy fresh vegetables with their own resealable top bags. So this is a higher quality product than was the identical kinds of sticks of celery bought a few decades ago. And yet, how do you adjust for inflation when this happens? So one of the tricks of adjusting for inflation is to understand that as quality improves, quality improvements are costly. It costs innovators and firms something to innovate, to create, and to implement, to offer those higher quality products. And those costs are reflected in the prices of the goods that you buy. So it's very easy when you have small quality improvements like this, it's very easy to confuse increases in the price of the product, or a portion of the increase in the price of the product, for being the result of inflation, rather than being the result of a product quality improvement. In short, it's very difficult for inflation adjusters to adjust for quality. And I put this up precisely because it's such a mundane thing. Our world, one of the themes that you'll see when I get to the heart of my talk in a little while, our world is full of these everyday small improvements, no one of which matters much. This doesn't matter a lot. If it was taken away today, you wouldn't grieve. Oh my gosh, no more resealable celery bags. How will I live? But we live in a world in which we have thousands, tens of thousands, millions of these kinds of small quality improvements. And when we take them in aggregate, and you recognize that in aggregate, each one of them may throw off an inflation adjustment, then I think, one part of my hypothesis is that the estimate of inflation over the past 30 or 40 years has been excessive. That in fact, a large part of the growth in wages is in fact a real growth in wages, and not just a reduction in the purchasing power of the dollar. You'll see more of what I mean later. We could talk, if I were interested in boring you, and I am a member of a profession, most of whose members believe it to be their public duty to bore their audiences. Right? And so I can do a little bit of that to show you that I'm a real economist. Right? We could talk, maybe it's more boring than looking at a PowerPoint presentation that's typed words. Right? We could talk about how, yes, the average, the income earned by the typical American household has stagnated pretty much over the past 30 years. But what's happened to the average size of the household, the average population of that household? It's fallen. Today, about 11% fewer people live in a typical American household than lived in that household in 1975 or 76. Therefore, the same amount of income is spread over a smaller number of people. If you have a household of 10 people that has $1 million of income, just picking a round number, then each person has on average $100,000 worth of income. If that household has only one person, that person has $1 million worth of income. Clearly, the smaller the number of people in the household, the fewer the number of people, the larger each of their individual incomes are. A lot of times when you hear people talk about stagnation in household income growth, those people they fail to account for reductions in the size of the typical American household. So you have a smaller number of people sharing in the household income. So the average household the population has fallen. We could also talk about, when we talk about stagnation of wages, we could also talk about how a large part of the growth in worker pay over the past 30 or 40 years has come not only in higher monetary wages or salaries, but in fringe benefits. And a lot of times people, when they talk about stagnation in wages, they fail to account for increases in the amount of pay that come in fringe benefits, health insurance, premium contributions to the workers' retirement fund, and the like. We can talk about what happens to a statistical measure, such as an average or a median, or how that statistical measure doesn't necessarily give an accurate account of what's going on with the population. An example I like to use of an average, or even for median, is height. So suppose you have a young family. You have 2 children. One is 3 years old, the other is a year old, and January 1st is you measure the average height of your children. And let's say you come up with, I don't know, 2 feet, 2.5 feet is the average height of the kids. And then during the course of the year, you have a 3rd child, a little infant. They're cute. And then the next January 1st, you measure the average height of your children. You'll say your infant was born on December 31st. It's time for tax deduction. And so so the infant is going to pull down the average. So let's say the newly calculated average next year is not 2.5 feet, let's say it's 2 feet. You don't conclude that your children are shrinking. You're just like, oh my gosh, Junior's shrinking, Sally's shrinking. You understand that in this case, the average figure does not tell you what's going on with individuals in the group from which the average is calculated. Sometimes averages can be revealing, sometimes they can be misleading. There was some wit many years ago who said, compared statistics to a bikini. And he said, well, statistics are like a bikini. I forget who said it. What they reveal is suggestive, but what they hide is vital. Yeah, think about that. And it's true. So a general lesson from this talk, if you take nothing else away, is look, I like statistics. I like empirical work. I think it's essential. I would never want to do away with it. But you always have to look at it skeptically, because it is very easy to tell a misleading story, either intentionally or not, with statistics if you don't understand how those statistics are calculated and the processes that go into gathering and processing those statistics. I'll skip through some of this. This is just different measures of inflation. If you look at I'm sorry, it's not out of focus here. If you look at the average income of households adjusted for inflation using the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, it has increased only 18%, as I showed you earlier, between 1976 and 2006. If you use the personal consumption expenditure deflator, which is another perfectly legitimate means of adjusting for inflation. Then the household income has increased not by 18%, but by 26%. Still not great, but different than 18%. You use the GDP deflator, another perfectly legitimate inflation adjuster. The same household income, nothing else changes. You know, within the Bill Gateses or Warren Buffetts of the world. It's a middle-class retailer. So this gives a good sense of what ordinary Americans were buying in 1975. With few exceptions, I stay away from clothing, if only because I don't want to, you know, style kind of gives you a distorted picture. Style is so different. And looking at mid-1970s clothing, it actually hurts the eye today. It would be like an insult to your senses if I showed too much of the clothing. You've got to get a sense here, that's pretty ugly. It was an ugly decade. But also, it was very difficult back then. I can't prove this to you because I don't have the catalog with me. But it's very difficult to find all cotton or all wool clothing. Most of the clothing in this catalog was made of polyester or rayon. Very little of it was 100% cotton or 100% wool. So again, with some exceptions, they were clothing. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at different products, such as this one. It's a coffee maker. And it gives the price. The price here is $36.49. In 1975, this is a picture directly out of that very catalog that you saw, taken with this very phone that I hold in my hand, cropped by my very son, who's not here to defend himself. Right? And I take the average wage earned, I took the wage earned by the average non-supervisory worker in 1970, $4.73. And I divide that into that price, and I ask, how many hours did that worker have to work in order to buy that product? In this case, that worker had to work nearly 8 hours to buy a 10-cup drip coffee maker. That tells us something, and we're going to compare that to today. This is a 10-cup drip coffee maker. I found this picture online. I divided the price of it by the average, by the same wage today that the typical non-supervised worker in 2012 makes. The roughly $20 wage today. So a typical worker today, the typical non-supervised worker today, has to work 40 minutes to buy a 10-cup drip coffee maker. In 1975, of course, they had to work nearly 8 hours. So certainly when it comes to coffee makers, Americans are a lot better off. Notice this is the basic model. It has no clock on it. It has no automatic settings. If the coffee is ready, you can set it at night and have it ready for you in the morning. It is a basic coffee drip coffee maker. So that's what we're going to do for a number of products. Here's a razor. I had to write in my son about to get the price. Variety. $29.99 to buy that razor. Kind of like a razor today, not that different. Shaves your face. Razor today, I'm pretty similar in quality. $2. So we're better off razor-wise. 6.3 hours then, 2 hours today to buy a razor. Here's one of the exceptions with clothing. I found some jeans. These are the only all-cotton jeans you see sold in the catalog in 1975. They were $6.97 a pair in 1975. And you divide that by the wage that the typical worker earned. Back then, it took that typical worker 1.5 hours to toil in order to earn enough money to buy a pair of jeans. This is a pair of jeans off Target's website. It cost $19.99, 1 hour of work today. So the price of jeans has fallen by about a third over the past 40 years. This is as salacious as this presentation gets. These are all cotton men's briefs. 75 minutes to buy a pair of 3 of those. 50 minutes to buy a pair of 3 today. These are things that have, the quality is probably the same. These are all cotton. Those are all cotton. If you took someone from 1975 and you brought them 40 immediately, showed them, they'd recognize immediately what it is. It wouldn't startle them. They'd yawn at it. But still, it's cheaper in terms of work time than they were when I was in high school. Luggage. Sears sold a lot of luggage. I chose sort of the middle price range of luggage. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive. One of the things that's interesting, I wish I could show it to you, but I can't. You'll see it why, is what's not in the catalog. And one of the many things that we notice today that is not in the Sears catalog is luggage with wheels. How many of you have luggage, I mean like a big suitcase without wheels on it? If you were alive in 1975, you were literally lugging, that's what's called luggage, your suitcase, your luggage, your valise, if you speak French. You couldn't find, the Sears didn't sell it. This is a middle range, I'm looking at the one on the far left. It took 7 hours of the typical worker time back then to buy that suitcase. What you could buy, however, this handy set of wheels that came separate. They sold the wheels separately. It's the only one they sold. It cost 4.4 hours of work to buy that thing. Look, it's pretty flimsy. There's a knob on top. You know, why did they put a handle? Knob on top. It retracts up and down depending on how much luggage you want to put on. So if you take this piece of luggage here, it costs 7 hours for that. Another 4.4 hours to buy the wheels to attach to it. It costs you 11.5 hours of work to get a piece of rollable luggage, something kind of sort of like we have today. This is what we have today. This piece of luggage is about the same size in cubic inches as the one I just showed you. It comes with wheels. The total package is 5.5 hours of work for the typical American worker today. So we're better off luggage-wise. Die-hard batteries. This is one of these items whose quality is not much different. 9 hours to buy a battery back then. Sears die-hard battery today. 4.95 hours to buy it today. So we're better off car battery-wise. That, if you don't know, is an exercise bike. In fact, it says deluxe stationary bike. That was the best stationary bike that Sears sold. The Dr. Seuss-like logo does not come with it. That's separate. $75 to buy that exercise bike. No, it has no, it's got a little speedometer on it, sort of manual speedometer. It has no electronic controls whatsoever. It's completely mechanical. But it is stationary. You can get good exercise on it, no doubt. It costs you nearly 16 hours or nearly 2 days of work if you're an ordinary worker to buy that exercise bike. 5.4 hours today, typical work to get a pretty bottom-of-the-line exercise bike. A 45 record. How many of you have ever seen a 45 record? Most of you haven't seen 45. I remember. So, in two sides to it. So this is, because I like the Beatles. I found a picture online of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. This was from the 60s, obviously, but they were still selling 45s in the 70s, I assure you. And they cost 99 cents. That was the typical price of 45. And you got 2 songs for them. 13 minutes a song. Okay. And you know, you wanted the song, I really want to listen to Bad Company, right? Or, you know, Feel Like Making Love by Foreigner. You'd go to the store, then you'd plop down $1, and you'd get the 45, and you take it home, and you put it on the record player, and you put the needle on the record player, and the needle would be in the grooves, and would go around, and you'd listen to the music. I know there are people today who think that, what do you think, man? What do you think? I don't know. Vinyl. I think, oh yeah, vinyl is better than CDs. Maybe I'm not as much of an audiophile as I think. I much prefer compact discs, because I remember vinyl and vinyl was a skippy all the time. or catch, you hear it all the time. But you can get 2 songs, 13 minutes. What about today? The iTunes logo. 1 song, 3.8 minutes. 13, 3.8. What a difference. So, entertainment. And how do we get songs today? So you hear the song you like. Oh yeah, I like that song. Hold on. You have it a few seconds later. There it is. You have it immediately. And it's in high def digital audio. You can listen to it in your headphones. You can plug it into a machine and get beautiful sound. You couldn't do that in the 1970s. The President of the United States could not download music in 1975, no matter how much he or she wanted. The Sultan of Brunei could not have done it. Today, if you're an ordinary American, you can do it for $1.29. How great is that? Clock radio. Look at this thing. 60 bucks for a clock radio. 12 and a half hours of work for the ordinary American to buy that in 1975. I found this on Amazon.com. 30 minutes to buy that. I started putting this lecture together about a year ago. I've updated it since. And I thought about taking this one out, but I'm going to keep it in for a reason. In a way, this is already dated. Right? Who buys clock radios anymore? They're in here. It's an app. It's like a standard app in every smartphone. You go to sleep at night, you want to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to study calculus or economics? Want to call your boyfriend to apologize or girlfriend? You set your alarm. It's here. It's the marginal cost is zero. Now, but if you want a genuine, proper, actual physical clock radio, you can get one for just a half hour of work time compared to nearly 13 hours back when I was a senior in high school. That, if you don't know, is something we used to call a typewriter. This is Sears' best typewriter. The best typewriter you could buy at Sears in 1975. Another thing that's not in the catalog, of course, is computers. No word processors of any sort. They were typewriters. You can buy this typewriter. There's a little cartridge that you buy separate to go in it. That's the key. And you type. That's a keyboard. You kind of recognize what a keyboard is. This is the QWERTY keyboard that I'm familiar with. But it's a typewriter. It's really bad for surfing the web. It's tough. I mean, it takes a long time to pull down a website using that thing. But that cost you, if you wanted to write a paper, that cost you nearly 60 hours of work, nearly a week and a half of work to buy that typewriter. And that's not including the cartridge. That's not including the correction of fluid that you have to use when you made a mistake. It's not including the carbon paper that you have to use if you want to make copies of what you're typing. Nearly a week and a half of work to buy a typewriter in 1975. Just to, this example really shows the difficulty of comparing quality. How do you compare that to this? They both have keyboards. That's true. Meant for the human hand. You can use both of them to write papers, letters, notes, memos. But really, the comparison ends there. You can surf the web on that's a MacBook Air. 52 hours, probably fallen in price since then. So, even though this can do vastly more than that, this does have one in it. That comes with its own sort of built-in printer. This doesn't. 52 hours, 57 hours to buy that. I think, even if we reverse, 57 for this and 52 for that, we'd much rather that. It's a much better product. That was not available. If that had popped down out of the sky in 1975 and was shown to my classmates and I'd have been dead. I mean, I would have just died of an ecstasy heart attack. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It sounds like I would have died of a happiness heart attack. Another thing that's not in the Sears catalog is anything like digital photography. It's a film camera. This is Sears' best film camera. A 35mm single lens reflex film camera. 347 bucks. Cost nearly 75 hours of work. Nearly 2 weeks of work to buy a film camera. Not including the film. You take pictures with it, and you send the film to a pharmacy or a film developer. A few days later, you get back the film. You didn't know if the picture came out well or poorly. You didn't know if your little niece had her eyes closed when the picture's taken. You didn't know if the sunlight was just right. Maybe it was overexposed, underexposed. Unlike today, we take a picture with our camera. So this is just sort of almost a random digital camera that I found. Less than 2 hours of work. 73 hours, less than 2 hours of work. But even there, photography comes with this. Not the greatest digital photography. Digital photography, you know, much better than that, I think, by a lot of standards anyway. The marginal cost is zero. There's a camera built into this. By the way, not only still, but video. And I take the picture and I don't like it. I go, they say there, that can come out, well, let's do it again. I looked through the catalog, I wanted to find something where the quality differences were as small as possible. And this is what I came up with, a file cabinet, a metal file cabinet. It's probably the case that that 4-drawer metal file cabinet is the same as any 4-drawer metal file cabinet you can buy today. $208 plus typical worker that did 44 hours to buy that. Here's a metal file cabinet today. I think I found this on the Walmart website, 11 hours. So it's fallen in price by 75% from 40 years ago. Automobile tires, here's best tire. Nearly 9 hours to buy that, 4 hours to buy a similar grade tire today. The gas grill. This is the best gas grill series. And just gaze upon that gas grill. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It cost you a week's worth of work to buy that gas grill. Isn't that, look at these things. I mean, you're going to impress the Joneses by having them over for a cookout. You'd have rather have that baby or that. Right? 13.1 hours to buy. That's off Home Depot's website. Buy that. You can't. It's hard to find today something like that. But it's a lot more expensive and the quality was a lot lower. Microwave oven. $440. 93 hours of work to buy a microwave oven in 1975. Similar size, similar power microwave oven, 4 hours today. Price falls even further. I predict, by the way, that in a couple of years we'll get a microwave app. Marginal cost will be zero. So we're better off than microwave oven. Dishwasher. 50 hours to buy a dishwasher. You could not get a quiet dishwasher back then than you could get today. You could have been the President of the United States and your dishwasher made a lot more noise. Fortunately, you lived in a big house, so you could be far away from the kitchen. But there were no dishwashers that had the kind of sound insulation qualities that the typical dishwasher has today. Sorry for the out of focus. See, I realized that over today. 12.2 hours by a dishwasher, nearly 50 hours by a dishwasher back then. Pocket calculator. I put calculators up only because I like to tell a calculator story. This is one from Sears. Sears' least expensive calculator in 1975. It had 6 digits. I mean, you could calculate all the way up to $999,999. 6 digits. Cost you $14. Cost you 3 hours of work to buy the calculator. Today, I found this one on Amazon. 1.5 minutes to buy a calculator. That's another thing. It comes with the phone. Who buys calculators today? I remember the first time I saw an electronic calculator very clearly. I was 14 years old. It was at Sears, at a Sears store. My parents took me to Sears, and I'd heard of these calculator things before. I walked in and I beheld them for the first time. I was a freshman in high school. And there were 4 of them. They were displayed beneath plexiglass. And they had the plexiglass cut out right above the keyboard on each calculator. And I remember going up to the calculator. I'd never seen or touched one before. 7, I forget the numbers I get. 7 plus 6 equals 13. You did it right away. You do it again. Got it right again. I'm like fascinated by the calculator. I'd never seen anything like that before. Right? The cheapest one in 1972 was $99. It added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided. That was it. Right? Then followed the price by 1975 to $14, the cheapest one. And of course, they continue to follow the prices. So I've literally gotten calculators free out of a cereal box. A vacuum cleaner, your house cleaning. 26.5 hours of work to buy a vacuum cleaner, 4 hours of work to buy a similar quality vacuum cleaner. That's probably higher quality, but at least similar in relative quality range today. If you're a lawyer, you like that thing because it looks like a tort offense waiting to happen. That's actually a workout bench. Not only do you go to the gym, lift heavy weights, but I suspect if you are of the manly type that goes to the gym and lift heavy weights, you don't want to be sitting on that. Look at that thing. That's the best one Sears had available. It's a workout bench. 13 hours of work. Now that looks more sturdy. 4 hours of work. Save the best for last. Oh. Probably the best for last. This is the Sears best television. Purchasable in 1975. Nearly a month of work to buy that TV. A whole month. It's not high def, obviously. You can't mount it on the wall. It's not without great difficulty. No remote control. There were no remote control televisions for sale in the Sears catalog in 1975. I know that there were remote controls back then. That Sears didn't offer them because they weren't widely available to the middle class. The only remote controls that were available, I remember my uncle had one. He was a bus driver in New Orleans. And I remember sitting on his lap when I was a young boy, this was back in the 60s. And he had a remote control which was attached by a wire to the set. It wasn't really remote, it was sort of kind of remote. It's a wire, and you press the button, and then you'd actually see the knob on the TV turn. You couldn't buy a TV with remote control. But it does say, our best console color TV features soft touch tuning, right? Where you can just go up to the TV and you can just touch the knob softly. The knob is hidden in the upper right-hand corner. You can pull the drawer out, and then you see the volume knob, the channel knob, and soft touch. You have to bang it like regular TV. Soft touch TV. Those, if you're my age or older, you remember the quality of TVs. Even Sears Best TV, certainly within 2 years, probably less, something would go wrong with it. Its vertical hold or its horizontal hold would go bad. And so, if you were, actually you did have remote controls back then. They were called children. I was a remote controller when I was young. Or change the channel. Turn it loud, turn it lower, turn it off, turn it on. Right? Or if the thing started, the picture started rotating, it was really annoying. And then you'd reach around, and there was a knob on the back of the TV. Touch the knob, and the TV, you could stop it from rotating. And they were always breaking down. The TV repairman would come out. I remember very clearly the TV repairman from my house, my grandmother's house. The TV repairman carried big bags of vacuum tubes to fix the TV. The TV broke, was out for a few days. At least you had to pay to get it fixed. Not high def, very expensive, nearly a month's worth of work. 17 hours by the high def TV, less than a half week of work. The TV breaks today, let's face it, what do? You don't call a TV repairman, you throw it away, you go to Target and buy another one. I could do more, show you more pictures. Well, I can't because I don't have them on my thing, but I could have put even more pictures from my Sears catalog from 1975 onto here. Compared the prices of things back then and the amount of work time required back then to the price of things today, and the amount of work time required today for similar work to buy those things. And for almost any goods and services, food, clothing, you come to the same conclusion. The amount of work time, ordinary, not top 1%, what the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls non-supervisory workers. Ordinary workers have to work to buy the vast majority of goods and services is today much, much less than it was in the mid-1970s. And as I hope you see, in addition to that, for almost all the goods, the quality is a lot higher. There's kind of a old wives' tale, you hear it, I'm sure it's still around. And my grandparents used to say, like Karen said, I'm sure my great-grandparents said, they don't make things like they used to. And that's absolutely true. They don't make things like they used to. Generally, they make things a lot better than they used to. That is a much better TV than that. It really is, despite that in my photograph I was a little out of focus. that is a much better workout bench than that. So the quality is improved, and the work time prices have fallen. Nothing that I showed you today proves in some kind of scientific Albert Einstein sense or Isaac Newton sense, mathematics sense, that the thesis of America's middle class stagnation is false. That kind of proof is really denied to anyone working in the social sciences. But I think it does present strong evidence or strong reason for you, if you hear, as you will, if you pay attention, the thesis of America's middle class stagnation, to question that thesis. There are three areas, and I'll end with this. There are three general classes of goods and services for which the amount of work time has gone up over the past 30 or 40 years. Those three areas, I think, are the only three general areas: housing, medical care, and education. We can talk about why. I will, given that this is an Adam Smith lecture, and I started with a picture of Milton Friedman, that these are three areas of the economy where the government is especially heavily involved, for better or for worse. But even there, so the amount of time the ordinary American has to toil at work in order to earn enough income to buy a unit of housing, say a square foot or a cubic foot of housing, a unit of medical care, no matter how measured, a year's worth of higher education, college education, such as you're buying now. The amount of time has indeed increased since the mid-1970s, and in some cases increased substantially. But even for these three things, it's not clear that Americans are worse off. Take housing. A typical house today is about 23% larger than it was, 17% larger than it was in 1975, 17% more square footage. And it comes equipped, a typical one does, with many more standard features. Built with a lot more termite-resistant materials, more PVC, less wood, so termites are less of a hassle. Many more. The typical house today is much more likely to have central air in addition to central heat than was the typical house in 1975. The typical house today is more likely to come equipped with its own automatic dishwasher, unlike in 1975. So the quality of housing has improved, even though the amount of work time to buy housing has gone up. Education. Price has gone up a lot. However, the return to education has gone up significantly. I confess, I forget offhand what the increase in that return is. It's significant, however. There is the amount of additional income that you will earn over your lifetime by virtue of your having a college degree as compared to having only a high school diploma has risen significantly since the 1970s. The amount of extra lifetime income that you're adding because of your going to college is much higher than was the amount of lifetime income that I added to my lifetime student income when I went to college. So you're buying a much more valuable asset. So you think of, to the extent that you go to school only to earn a higher income, and some people do, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but a lot of people do go to college so that they can earn more money. If you think of your education as like a bond, and that bond pays you a certain amount of extra income every year. Clearly, if the amount of extra income that it pays you each year is rising, you're willing to pay a higher price for it. It's a more valuable asset. So even though the amount of money you have to pay, the cost out of your out-of-pocket expenses to go to college has increased, the return that you get has increased also. Whether it's increased by enough to offset the higher cost, I cannot say. But it is at least a consideration to keep in mind. And finally, healthcare. Do a mental experiment. It's kind of hard if you don't remember the 1970s to do the mental experiment. But there are a handful of us in this room who remember the 1970s and we can do it. The mental experiment is this. So from what you know of the 70s, you can think of it. Or you can Google what life is like in the 70s and think of it. The mental experiment is this. If you have a choice, right today, with your 2013 income, you can buy 1975 quality medical care at 1975 prices, or buy the 2013 medical care at 2013 prices. What would you do? I can't speak for you because I'm not you, but I advise you to take the latter option. 1975 healthcare at 1975 prices was a lot cheaper by almost any measure than is 2013 healthcare at 2013 prices. But the quality of medical care today is so much higher than it was then. Both in its effectiveness in curing people of disease and extending our lives, and rates of cancer survival today are much higher than they were in the 1970s. The ability of dentists to allow you to keep your teeth, clean your teeth in ways so they don't get as many cavities. There used to be a Crest commercial for toothpaste that ran into the 1970s. I remember very clearly the child, and the little child would run back to mom, or dad, would run back to dad. His mom would take the kid to the dentist early in the day, and the kid would pull the tube of Crest and say to dad, Dad, only 2 cavities. They're proud. Only 2 cavities on this, 6-month dental checkup, right? Without Crest, you'd have gotten 10, or right? Whatever it was. I mean, Crest wouldn't advertise that today. Right? Only 2 cavities. Don't use this stuff. Right? And in part, it's not because in this case toothpaste has improved dramatically, although it has, but dental care, dental hygiene has improved. We have medicines today, high blood pressure medicines, anti-cholesterol medicines, non-invasive medical surgery that simply were not available in 1975. And so even though the work time cost of medical care has risen, the quality has risen. And so if you would choose, as I would, to nevertheless use today's medical care at today's higher prices as compared to 1975 medical care at 1975 prices, but in a way, that's a way of saying, well, all other things equal, medical care today, despite all of its problems, no one thinks it's a perfect market. No one thinks that it can't be improved. But nevertheless, despite all that, medical care today remains a better bargain than it was in the mid-1970s. In short, I think the stagnation thesis is mistaken. Once again, I don't have any absolute knockdown, drop-dead proofs that it's mistaken, but I think we have a lot of good anecdotal evidence, enough anecdotal evidence to rise, to be still weighty as to actually cause you, I hope, to question seriously anyone who tells you that you as a middle-class American live no better than your parents lived in 1975 or grandparents. Thank you very much.
We have a few minutes for questions. If anybody
Yes, sir. My great uncle. Yes, my grandfather. Oh, the question about happiness. That's a good question, but my thesis is not about happiness. I just have but I would be a lot less happy if